Hi everyone, welcome back to UnravelingRare. I'm your host Eleni Pitsinyaga, and today we'll be talking about AP-4. AP-4, hereditary spastic paraplegia, is a disorder made up of four genes that could raise four distinct diagnoses. So we have SPG47, SPG50, 51, and 52. With us today, we have Casey Edwards, who is the Community Relations Coordinator at Cure AP4, and she's also a mother of a child with AP4. So, Casey, I'll pass it on to you. I'd like you to introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your background.
Hi. As you mentioned, Casey, mom of, she's now 9 years old, and it's now referred to as AP-4, hereditary spastic paraplegia. When we first got the diagnosis, it was referred to as SPG47. So the SPG stands for spastic paraplegia gene number 47. It falls under an umbrella category of hereditary spastic paraplegia, which has about 80 genes identified to cause the symptoms. We started this nonprofit in 2016 with another family when we got our daughter's ultra rare diagnosis. Actually, we had learned she was the 10th in the world with it, and by a very coincidental series of events, we managed to find another family a few states over whose daughter was around the same age and who also got diagnosed with SPG 47. We met, co-founded the company, and here we are today.
So, since there are four different genes, and it's kind of like an umbrella term, like what are the challenges that AP4 is facing with being an orphan disorder that has four linked genes?
Yeah, so I think this is an interesting sort of phenomenon we will be finding as more and more genes get identified that cause the same symptoms of ultra rare diseases. Like, I don't want to misspeak, but I think a lot of the neurodegenerative and degenerative diseases often have different genes that cause the same symptoms. And to look at it a different way, like cerebral palsy, it's starting to find that there's genetic predisposition to some of the symptoms. Essentially, it dilutes the funding once these genes start to divide and focus on their particular gene. However, in a monogenetic disorder such as ours, we were told very early on that gene therapy is the most promising therapeutic. So in one way, the genes separate. We changed our nonprofit to Cure SPG47 to Cure AP4 to try to incorporate the four genes and help with research and network. There were other nonprofits that were parent-led that started to particularly focus on the gene therapy. So in that way, things kind of got siloed. But in a way, it works for other therapeutics and not gene therapy moving forward. But anyway, I think that the biggest problem is it can cause a divide in a disorder that has the same symptoms, the same palliative care, speech therapy, where you can learn a lot from each other. There's also a divide in resources. Necessary, though, unfortunately.
What do you think is a motivator for somebody choosing gene therapy as opposed to maybe, drug therapy?
Well, I remember our first conference back in 2017, and we had a lot of researchers and specialists there. And overwhelmingly, the response was gene therapy at the time. I think, and I'm learning a lot more as I go. As a parent new to it at that time, it seemed like the dream therapeutic where you replace a gene. Magic, it's all of a sudden you're making this new gene and it's going to help everything. And, you learn I think it's still because it's a one-time treatment and because it's essentially supposed to offer some making of the protein. If it gets into the brain enough, it can kind of go straight to the source. It's not something you take all the time, every day. It doesn't have, I think, some of the side effects that might come with other medications. And it was kind of when we had the drug screening offered at that time, it kind of seemed like the drug screening was more of a Hail Mary uh, to go for as opposed to gene therapy. And if you only have one chance in one way, if you're only going to be able to fund one therapeutic, you're going to take the one that people say, might offer the most hope. So I think that's why at the time. We are learning more, though, that if you can afford it, that gene therapy is not a cure. It's not going to just fix everything, and that you're going to have to throw as many therapeutics as possible, sort of, that can be identified at it in order to get the most optimum outcome.
So, how have all these, different opportunities and different genes, different methods of cure impacted Cure before strategy?
Well, very early on, there's only a finite amount of money, and we didn't even have enough to be able to fund the gene therapy very early on. So it was sort of a risk that we had a series of a lot of good luck at the beginning, and we were able to have the funding. Luck and hard work with the Duffys. They held a country club held a golf event that made over $100,000. We had gotten some generous donations, and we felt comfortable enough to be able to put some seed funding into repurposing of drug screening and development of what's called induced pluripotent stem cells, which is basically takes a biopsy from the kids and the same sex control and turns it into neurons, which to me is basically magic, but it's science and it's amazing. And so it's really, as more research got made, as our principal investigators, both we have in gene therapy and the drug screening, rock stars getting more grants and more financial help, we found that we were able to look into different outlets. So I really think it's just, whatever you can handle, you want to throw as much into it as possible.
Yeah, and I think this is, kind of where patient stratification comes in. Do you think that patient stratification would ultimately accelerate a cure for AP4?
I certainly hope so. We want to take any acceleration as possible. I think what in the scheme of things, I think patient stratification will help identify some of the patients that might benefit more or less from different therapeutics, which is amazing. I think we can edit this, right? I think that's what I always have to relook that up. I think in the bigger scheme of things for this, if there's a way to stratify the entire HSP community and to be able to identify if there's similar pathways between certain subtypes, and because the it's named hereditary spastic paraplegia. Spasticity is the most common symptom, the one that is shared by, I would have to assume, everyone to get this diagnosis. If if they can identify therapeutics, drugs that might be able to stratify certain populations that might benefit from one type of drug and another type of drug, that's pooling, making an ultra rare, ultra rare disease a little bit more common, a little bit more funding to be able to put into development of drugs and optimizing anything that might be found. And that certainly can help expedite getting a therapeutic to market. I mean, it's at some of these ultra rare diseases, it's like, getting blood from a stone. The money is not necessarily there. So the more that you can uh, make this small pool bigger and identify the patients that might benefit from certain therapeutics, I think that's absolutely what we need.
It's almost like um, not taking the individualistic approach and finding something for like the greater good and something more unified to ultimately help more people at the same time that it would take to treat an individual group.
Yeah, absolutely. I very early on, one of our board members, she's in biotech, and she said, you need to find a more common disorder that is related, that somehow has something in common with your disorder. And I believe that's part of what Unravel is doing, is trying to find commonalities with ultra rare disease and more mainstream diseases in order to be able to find a therapeutic that will help the greater good. And that is literally the dream. That's my dream for years, and one of the reasons why I was so drawn to Unravel and wanting to get involved in the research with them. It's an amazing uh, goal.
Thank you so much for participating. I would just like you to, close off, maybe send off a message to people who are curious about learning more about AP4, or parents who have AP4 and want to get connected to a community.
Yeah, sure. I we are most easily found probably at our website, which is www.cureap4.org, or we can be found on Facebook, CureAP4. And yeah, just reach out. I think sometimes people are shy, and there's sometimes a language barrier because there's people from different countries. And I think once they get up the confidence to become part of the support group, I've heard that it really helps to be able to talk to other parents and kind of learn and share about this life.
Thank you so much, Casey. That was amazing.
No problem. Thank you very much.